God preordained that ticket before the foundation of the world. When you wreck your car, when you get sick, when you get cancer, when you get bronchitis, when you get emphysema, when you can't pay your bills, God's ordained it. And He's ordained it for your good. He works all these things together for our good, doesn't He? He's doing it all for us. So why are we complaining if He's determined the timing of everything? That's what He's saying here. And He's saying here that timing has a boundary line. And it has a habitation. He says here, the determined has to do with timing. And then He says, He's determined the times of everything that will ever happen. The times before appointed. Before appointed is the one word. It's the word pro-tasso. Before appointed. Before appointed. Before tasso. Orderly arrangement. There was an arrangement before the foundation of the world. Same word, Acts 13:48. As many as were ordained to eternal life believed, and nobody else. So God has prearranged the timing of everything, and it has been before the foundation of the world. The timing of everything in your life has been appointed. The exact day you graduate from school, the exact day you fail from school. The exact day you pass a test, you fail a test. You go out and take a test a dozen times to get your builder's license or something. God determines when you fail it and when you pass it. He's determined whether you'll study hard enough for it or whether you won't. He's determined whether you'll get your driver's license or whether you won't. If we can ever learn that God has preordained everything, we can get a hold of this thing, can't we? Now, and He said there is a boundary, horothesia, for timing. Horothesia. Remember the word horos? That's the word coast. It's a derivative of the word horizo. It means a coast or a bound. So God has tithemi, Tithemi. He has laid out the boundary of the coast, the bounds of all things that will ever happen, the timing of everything. He's laid it out. And then He says it has a habitation. He said this boundary has a habitation. The word habitation is katoikia. Katoikia. It's the same thing as a house. Oikia. It comes from the word kata, means down, and oikos. Oikos means house or family. It means a place of housing down. So what God is saying, just like you have a housing for your transmission, the inner workings of your transmission is all the timing of everything throughout all time that will ever happen, or that has ever happened, or that will happen. It's all within this housing, and God has it exactly ordained. That means all the wars in the world, all the sickness in the world, all of your life, all of my life, every wreck I have, every ticket I've gotten, everything I eat, everything I do, it's all in a housing. And it cannot go beyond that housing. But how are you going to know this unless you know what determined means? And look over here one more time at Job 14. That's exactly what he's saying over here, Job 14. That's why it's important. You don't have to be brilliant to learn how to look these words up. It's not really hard. If you can learn. Let me ask you this. How hard can Greek be? Every 5-year-old in the first century was speaking one of the Greek Koine, weren't they? How hard is it for 5-year-olds to do that? Sometimes I listen to Christopher and I think, how in the world does he know those words? He'll say stuff and I'll say, Eric, where'd you get that? I say, I don't know. He'll say some amazing things. Well, if they can learn these things, if kids can learn it, how can you say, well, it's just too hard? That's because you're not 5 living 2,000 years ago. You could learn it if you're 5. Right? Now, look here in Job 14. He's saying the same thing here. Job 14 and verse, let's read 4 and 5. Who can bring a clean thing out of unclean? Not one. Seeing his days are determined, decided. Charat, C-H-A-R-A-T-S. Decided. Charat has the idea of something pointed or sharp. It's like putting up a boundary stake at the end of your boundary. Okay, stick that in the ground. That's the end of the boundary. It's a sharp cutting place. You can't go beyond that. And then he says, his days are determined. The number of his months are with thee, Lord. Thou hast appointed his, the word asa, A-S-A. H, A-S-A-H. Thou hast appointed or determined or accomplished or performed or set his bounds. C-H-O-Q. Ordinance. What's been ordained. God has set the boundary that he cannot pass. You can't get over the boundary that God's ordained, no matter how much you worry about it. No matter how much you stress, you can't get around it. So high, you can't get over it. So low, you can't get under it. So wide, you can't get around it. You got to come in at the door. Isn't that right? That's it. Just thought of that. All right. So he says, you can't get around the ordination of God. It's there. Everything has a meaning. Let me give you one more predestination verse here. All right. Look over and look back in Acts 17:31. Acts 17. I meant to give you this while I was there, but it didn't. It's because the other verse fits so well with it. All right, 17:31. Maybe it could, if anything difficult is going on in your life, God ordained it before the foundation of the world. Does that mean you're supposed to sit down in it and not try to do anything about the difficulties? No. Be like Christ. Be responsible. Keep working at what you're doing. Try to do all you can do, and the results will belong to God. Do what you can do to correct any situation. You don't say, well, I'm poor, I'm poverty-stricken, so I'll sit here in it. God ordained it. No, he ordained you to do that because you're dumb enough to say, God ordained me to be poor, so I'll sit here. If God ordained you to get up and work at it, he ordained you to come out of it. That's the point. He didn't ordain you to be there and sit there and never do anything about it. Wasn't Jesus accountable? Wasn't he responsible? We've been predestined to be like Jesus and be responsible.